Hello, Bodyboard world. It's Jason from Ronin Bodyboards, doing another Boog Chat. So just wait for people to start showing up. We've got a few topics I want to cover today, and I'll be taking any kind of questions that people can pop in with in the chat over on the right hand side of the screen. I know some people had mentioned that if you're watching like on a TV or something, that you might not be able to see the live comments or something. I usually watch these live streams on a computer or my phone or a tablet or something. So usually you can see the live questions and stuff over on that side of the screen. It should be like right up over here if you're on a computer or a phone or a laptop or whatever. So just gonna kind of sit here for a few minutes and wait for people to start popping in. Hopefully people start showing up. I got it out there on social that I'm gonna start doing these things, like I said, every Friday night, and hopefully people can make it consistently. That's kind of my goal here. So if anybody has any questions, just start popping them in over on the side here. Down on the bottom, you can type stuff in and ask questions. So if you have anything any specific questions you guys want to hit me up with, go for it. I don't know. It's kind of I mentioned some stuff about cores last week, and there's some questions about that, and so I got a few samples sitting here. Maybe I'll throw those into the camera, and so you can kind of take a look at some of that stuff today, and look at some of the properties between different cores and stuff. I'll probably just start with that today and right now until people start showing up. I don't want to get into it too early till people start showing up. Looks like we got 4 people here now. Like I said, start hitting any of the questions over on the screen. Hit me up. I'll start out answering anything that's asked. So as far as polypropylene goes, there's white polypropylene. This is what I use for all of my cores. I don't know how much you can kind of see here, but so this is a standard like a 1.7 or it's 1.9 pound polypropylene. You can see it's got good flex, and if you flex this stuff, it really pops back to flat pretty quickly, right? Like, one of the really cool things about Polypro, when you go to flex the board, it really has good recoil and pops back to flat really quickly. This is a piece of black Polypro, so it kind of does the same thing. Like, you can see how it pops and snaps back really quickly to shape. I like this black Polypro. I've used this for quite a few of my personal boards. It's kind of harder to get than the white stuff. It all comes from the same U.S. manufacturer, but it does have, it seem like, I don't know if you can see it on here, but there's like a little bit more air pockets between the beads on this. So it tends to be maybe just a hair lighter than the white stuff. You can see there's that, you just don't get those air pockets in between all the beads and stuff. So the black stuff tends to be just a little bit lighter, but like I said, mentioned on the previous chat that sometimes if water gets into the core, it can seep into all these little creeps and crevices in those little air pockets you're seeing in between the beads. So sometimes this might get a little bit more waterlogged over time than maybe something that's a little bit more solid like the white. And I don't know if anybody's been following, but I just got my core order yesterday, so of the new batch. Same manufacturer, different supplier, but man, the stuff is looking really good. I'm really excited about the new batch of core. Now, and there's some people also had mentioned, so, they like PE cores versus PP cores. Now, I'd mentioned that I'm not a super big fan of PE just because of, and I'll show you right now, is that this is a piece of Ethafoam, 2.2 pound. It's pretty standard for all the old school bodyboard core. And it's not beaded, it's more of expanded. So you're not going to see the beads, but it really is a good, nice, solid, there's no air pockets at all in this stuff. So it might even be a little bit more waterproof than some of the other polypropylenes. But if you look at this stuff, it's nice and flat right now. But say, okay, now I'm going to go and flex my board. Watch what happens. So I'm flexing this stuff. You can obviously see this stuff is super flexy compared to the Polypro. But if you watch this stuff, I flex it. Now look, watch how long it takes it to go back to shape. I mean, it'll take 3 or 4 minutes before it goes back to flat. I mean, I can even turn it upside down like this, and it's still, I mean, you can see how long it takes to go back to flat. I mean, some people they love this stuff because it's flexy, but boy, I'll tell you, that's the killer for me. Is I love a good recoil in my board. You go and flex your board, I want my board to pop right back to flat, and there's magic and things that happen with that. So, like I said, to me, just inferior. It's not as good as polypropylene, just for that recoil factor. And it's also way more spongy. Like you can just crush this stuff. Like, I mean, I realize everything gets skins, and once you get bottom slick on stuff, it really adds more stiffness to a board. So, I mean, but this is the basic characteristics of what core does. I mean, I want a core that snaps back to shape, not something that just goes. It's like a wet noodle, you know, versus al dente. I like al dente in my cores. I don't want a wet noodle. So, one of the other cores that I've experimented a little bit, you know, people are big fans of Arcel. People talk a lot about Arcel, but a lot of people don't know what what Arcel is. And there's modern versions. I don't think they make the true Arcel anymore, but there's like modern versions of it. What that is it's a blend of PE, like what I just showed you, and EPS, which is basically styrofoam. Expanded polystyrene is EPS. So this is a modern version of that stuff. And I can get this stuff from a Southern California manufacturer, and it's commonly called iFoam, or I just call it, you know, it's the modern Arcel. Stuff's super light. I've made one board with this stuff that I personally rode, but I wasn't too hip on it. It's super light, and that's one of the cool things. One of the really good properties about this. It's nice and dense too. You don't see any of the air pockets or anything like you did with that black piece. So it's really nice and solid as far as goes. But I'll tell you the real drawback for this about me is that it's got really good recoil. I mean, that part's good, but man, I'll tell you what, it dents and crushes, and it doesn't return back. So the board that I have that I rode that I made out of this stuff, it just has elbow dings in it, and D-lams in the deck. It's said I probably won't be using this stuff too much just because of the denting factor. You can just take your thumb and crush this. And I mean, it's kind of hard to see in the video here, but you can see it. Like, look, I just pushed that right there in with my thumb, and that will not ever come back to flat. It's always going to have that dent in it. It just stays. So you can imagine if you're really digging an elbow or something into the deck of your board, it's going to dent, and it's always going to have. It's not that good. I mean, it's light. It stays light. It keeps the water out. But man, over time, and I have a feeling, and it's kind of like the EPS also, it's going to crease and break easier. It's kind of more brittle. So you can take this stuff and break it like styrofoam, you know, like styrofoam, you can just take a piece of styrofoam and just crack it, break it apart. This stuff kind of feels like styrofoam a lot. So that's just a couple of the different styles of cores that, you know, are commonly used in bodyboards these days. I know some of the other manufacturers are experimenting with some stuff, but I try to, you know, stay with stuff that's traditional that I know how to work with. So, hey, is that Bob right there on the ask a question here? And then let me just see what's going on over here. Oh, he's asking about the tombstone and versus regular shape. And then he's asking about the wide nose version of the tombstone versus a regular nose. Okay, so this board kind of came off of some stuff I was doing back before I started running. I made one board for a custom one for Colin Hurley. They have a tubes model that's real similar to the tombstone, but so what I did was once I started running, I was like, man, I really wanted to experiment personally with the tombstone shape, and I wanted to ride one because I was really curious on how they went. So what it is it tends to be a little bit wider and straighter. And the wide point is crazy far forward too, and you have a really wide tail. So what happens is you get really long straight rails, and it's wider. There's more like surface area across the bottom. So what happens is when I call it my longboard. Yeah, I ride it on small. I mean, you can ride it in bigger ways. I know guys that do, but I prone ride in DK on mine. It's a standard nose one. It's number 26, I believe. And I've been riding that board for, gosh, almost 4 years now. It's been around for a long time, and I still love it. I ride it all the time on smaller days still. Where my normal boards, I've been through quite a few of them because I tend to ride those on bigger days, and I just, you know, I beat them up. I ride them hard. I ride them a lot. So anyway, tombstones, like I said, man, there's something about it. It paddles crazy fast, number one, because you have all that surface area. I think about the whole wider template of it is that once you get paddling or riding on a wave, it gets up and starts planing faster than a narrower, smaller smaller board just because of the surface area across the bottom. I know when I'm paddling, it just paddles faster than my normal board. But it also when you're riding on a wave, what I notice the most about the Tombstone is that it catches waves super easy because, like I said, it paddles really well. But once you're riding, you can really scoot forward on the board and ride further up on the nose than a normal board, like to drive for speed and without purling, because you have that wide point super far forward, and it just doesn't purl, which means you can lean forward, get way up on the nose, and it'll just make sections that a normal board just won't make. It, like a softer, smaller section you just need to make, it can just drive through sections that. It also is the best spinning board ever. Because it has all that surface area in the front part of the nose, and once you shift forward and turn your head and spin, it just goes whoop. It's amazing spinner. Super wide tail. Mine's a V tail. I've made a couple different tails on different versions of the Tombstones, but I'm just a fan of the V tail. I've been, like I said in the previous chat, all my old custom boards are all V tails, so that tail feels great to me. It always has. I mean, but all my higher, normal boards all have scallop tails now. That's just the tail I prefer to ride when the waves get good. Now, a wide nose, I personally haven't ridden a wide nose. I take that back. I've ridden Jordan's board because I made Jordan Stoller the one, and I took it over to him when I went over the North Shore last January. So I hand delivered it to him on the North Shore, and I got to. We went out. I mean, I was staying with him, so we went out a bunch of stuff, bunch of sessions, and he took that board out a lot. So I got to ride it one day, but it's a square. His is a square tail, I think. And to me, the square tail is just too loose for me. It felt like I was driving a bus because the nose was so wide. It's just a wider nose than what I'm personally used to. That's what he said. It feels like I'm driving a bus versus like a little sports car. So you just got that wider nose type of feel, and I don't know. And because the wide point's so far forward on these Tombstones, like I said, it just makes for a really long straight rail. It's not the greatest turning board. I mean, you can still turn them, no problem. But I'll tell you what, once you get that thing on rail and you're driving and going down the line on rail, it is just so fast. It's a missile because there's not much curve in the rail. So it's just a super fast board and super fun in smaller conditions. I love it. It's just. What's up, Nathan? Good to see you in here. What's up? Nathan's asking about how to stiffen up a PP core without any stringers or mesh. Well, those are the ways you stiffen up boards. I mean, you can make a thicker board. I think that would be probably the number one way to make it stiffer is just to go a little bit thicker on it. But obviously there's some drawbacks to thicker boards. A lot of guys say, I need more volume, so because my board doesn't float me. I've heard that a lot. Is my board won't float me. And so as far as going thicker on a board, there's pros and cons to that too, because too much float is a bad thing. Because once you, like I was talking about before, once you get riding and you get up to speed, your board lifts out of the water. It's kind of like think about a boat. When a boat's sitting flat in the lake, it's sitting down, or in the water, it's sitting down. But once you get up to speed, it like lifts up. Boards, surfboards and bodyboards do the same thing. So once you get up to speed, you get that lift factor. And the more buoyant your board is, the more you're going to be riding up on the surface of the water, and the more tendency it's going to be to more side slip and be more loose because you're riding way more up in the water instead of sinking in just a little bit. Once you get going on a wave, you don't really need all that buoyancy. Really, it's good if you're using the energy of the wave to push you. So it's almost better if your rail is sinking in a little bit. You see, like a lot of guys that do tow surfing, they weight all their boards down because they're going so fast, and that's what happens is they got so much lift going on. They want that weight to sink them back down into the wave face so they can get the hold that they need. Bodyboards work the same way. I mean, you really want your board to sink into the wave when you're going fast, so that way you're not losing control. So I hope that kind of answers that question. Somebody's asking about the different differences between a double concave from a single concave or a single to double concave. I think you just get a little bit more tracking. Like I said in the previous chat, all my old boards were all single concaves, and all my old customs were single concaves, and I loved it until I started playing around with adding ribs and multi-channel type setups. I just think you get more tracking once you start adding all of the ribs into the multi-channel designs. You just get more tracking. It feels really good on rail no matter what, especially the further you take those concaves up in the board, your rail just starts holding and digging in. And you look at surfboards and how I mean, there's a lot you can take from surfboard channel designs and incorporate that stuff in the bodyboard design. I think that is the future of channels and design, channel designs. You can just look at what they've done with surfboards for years and how things evolved there. And that's where we need bodyboarding to go, is moving forward with these channel designs. And there's so many benefits from it. So yeah, I think that's the difference, is that you get a little bit better tracking when you start adding the ribs in. And if it's just a single to double concave, you're going to get a little bit more bite in the tail, I think, maybe just because you have that center rib and that, because you get that flow from single to double. What it also does is it channels the water in certain ways. Like, you look at like the 3 to 6 designs that I do, they have they start at a 3, but then they fade into a 6 out the tail. And I think what that also does is it creates maybe just a little bit of lift in the tail too. So as the water channels through the bigger channel, and then it funnels into the 2 channels off the tail, it adds maybe just a hair of a lift in the tail. So what that does is that's only going to add speed, because when you sit back on the tail, if it's going to lift you just a little bit, that's taking you and lifting you forward, and forward means fast. The more you sit back on the tail, the more drag you're going to have, and the slower you're going to go. So that's all. That's basically what the thought behind it. And you also get a little bit more volume if you're taking and you're single concaving out the whole board. You're losing some volume out of the board too. So if you're adding that double concave, you might be adding just a little bit more volume into the back tail too. So you might get a little more float in the tail, and just it's going to obviously hold probably a little better than just a single concave. So yeah, keep the questions coming, guys. I this is what it's all about, man. I'm here to just kind of spread some knowledge, and I hope that the core talk earlier helped some people. I mean, I don't know if everybody got to see that, but if you missed anything, you can these live chats will always be posted back on the YouTube, and you can go back and watch any parts you missed, and check out the replay of the chat on the side. And if you're missing any questions or stuff too, you can see all that later. Yep. DK is super popular, the single to double or just double concave. I know a lot of guys. I make a lot of DK boards that go single to double, or just double all the way through. Yeah, it's super popular with DK riders. I mean, it worked great for prone too. It's all personal preference. What's Kirk's asking about Scallop Tail and what's the theory behind it? Really, for me. Well, there's 2 things going on. Well, there's kind of 3. There's Scallop tails are designed to work with the bottoms. Yeah, Sterling, Yeah, it's I'm glad to see you kind of riding on one of the 3 to 6s finally, so you can see what I've been riding for quite a few years now. It's a great thing. So anyway, 3 to 6 is what they're all about, is hold. What it does, the Scallop tails, it's about hold. So and it's how the channels work. Say like it's a 3 to 6, and you go, that's okay, you're still here, Sterling. So the scallops, how many scallops on the bottom side of the board usually are cohesive with how many channels are working through the bottom of the board. So usually where the rib of the channel comes out, you have a point of a scallop. So it's kind of a cohesive design with the scallops, how many scallops you have versus what the channel setup is. And then on the top side of the board, so yeah, I mean, if you have a quad channel bottom, you're probably going to have a quad scallop going across the top. Now, on the bottom, on the top side, what I've learned over the years, I've experimented with a few of the quad. Like if you just have a straight quad on the bottom and then you just fade that into a quad on the top. I'm about the top side of the board of the tail needs to be comfortable for the rider. That's ultimately what it's about. So, that having the proper setup on the top side of the board that's comfortable, that locks the rider into the tail, so you're not slipping and sliding around on the tail. Like a full crescent, you tend to slip and slide around the tail a little bit in hairy situations, like the wave comes over and it kind of gets you sideways and it bounces you and you slip and slide around the tail. But if you have a 3 scallop on the top, it's seriously, there's something about it that just locks your hips and thighs into those 2 outer scallops, and you just don't slide around on the tail near as much as you would like something that has like a crescent top. And it all started from a bat tail or tubes, what they called a a gull wing tail, and the gull wing's laid back into the board a little bit more, and it's kind of bat style. And I had an old board that I made, an old tubes board that had a gull wing tail, and what it was is it was a ball cruncher, absolutely. I loved how it locked my hips into the two side parts, but that center bump was just a crusher. So what I did was I got back from one of my Hawaii trips. I took that board to Hawaii, and I was just like, oh man, I know I got to get rid of that bump. So what I did was I just took that center bump and just cut it out of the tail, and then the light bulb went off. I was like, oh yeah. So there's a few tubes boards that do have scallop tails that I made, but most of them and the whole tail design's kind of evolved through the years I've been doing Ronin. It's really evolved into a very cool, very functional tail. So that's kind of the idea behind the scallop tails. Yeah. Let's see. Bob's asking if there's any design elements that that specifically help with paddling out versus on a wave performance. So, well, I would say that like it gets back to that tombstone idea. The more surface area you have, and you can kind of get up to speed and get out of the water and get some momentum going, that's going to make you faster. As far as catch, I still think the tombstones are the best. You can catch the tiniest little ripple of a wave on that thing. It's just great, just because of the extra surface area you have across the bottom of the board. That makes boards paddle faster. So like whether you're paddling out to get to the lineup or you're trying to paddle to catch the wave, the thing just gets up to speed way faster than a normal board was because it lifts faster. Yeah, Sterling, you got a tombstone. I think it's good to have options. It's good to have a lot. I have probably about two. I have a third board that I haven't ridden, the 420 board. I just haven't ridden it yet because the waves haven't been good enough. But I basically have one or two like normal boards, and then I have my tombstone. And then I don't really keep a lot of boards, I have history of boards, but you got to have both, man. You got what Jim knows too. Jim has a couple tombstones. He's on the tombstone program as well. Okay, yeah. So as far as the scallop tail, what it does is it holds. What it does, like when you're on a wave and you're going, the steeper the wave face and you sit back on that tail, it'll bite and it won't side slip out as much. We kind of covered this a little bit in the first chapter. I don't mind going over it again. So what it does is when you sit back on that tail, because it doesn't have like a clip crescent. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of clip crescents because they're so side slippy out. What it does is it just locks and holds you into the wave face, and it just doesn't side slip out. Which means it tracks your direction because it's all cohesive with the channels. So you just have hold on a steeper wave face way better than you would a clip crescent. And then once you get out of the open face and you go to crank a turn, when you sit back on the tail and you go through a turn, it just bites and holds through a turn like no other tail. It hands down is my favorite tail design that I personally ride. So I really only ride a V tail or a scallop tail these days. Those are my two favorite tails. Maybe some cons about the scallop tails. There are some things because it is a little bite. Like I said, it's made to bite and grab and hold. So what happens is maybe sometimes that you've got to be conscious of it when you're spinning. It can't, you get halfway, because in order to spin, I heard some other people talk about, can you spin all these long multi-channel boards? Well, how I try to do my longer channels is I really don't like it to do them past where your elbow's at on the board. Like from your elbow forward should be kind of flat, and that gets into the nose section. So what happens is when you go into your spin, you're going to shift your weight forward and you're going to turn your head and engage the spin. What you got to do is you got to release your tail because that tail's just biting and holding, just like so you get more up on the nose of your board, and so you're spinning from your elbows forward is kind of where you should be at when you go into your spin. And really, you got to release the tail, and all those channels should be out of the water, and you should be spinning on that flat part of the front part of the nose that shouldn't have any channels. So it spins just fine. So okay, so now when you get around on your spin, what happens is that if that tail catches anywhere when you're halfway through your spin, it can be a little more sticky if it catches any part of the way, where a clip crescent or something like that might be a little bit more forgiving when you're on the second half of your spin. So the scallop tail, you just got to be conscious. It can be a little bit more catchy on. But what happens is when you come back around and you're going to reset your line and go, it will engage its line and start tracking its direction way faster than, like, if you have long channels and a scallop tail, it's going to start tracking and holding way faster than like a clip crescent standard channel board would go. So you can just re-engage your line and get going way faster than you could with a standard setup. Andrew asks, how's the shirt, Andrew? You like this one? Andrew's asking, what's my favorite bodyboard maneuver? Well, if you count getting barreled a maneuver, that would be my favorite. I think that's the goal of all of us, is to get as deep as we can and make it out. You know, you can get deep, but you got to be able to make it out. There's nothing better than that, being in the barrel and making it out. Yeah, after that, I mean, I'm a big spinner. Like I said, I don't know if people know, I'm a pretty tall fellow, so I'm like 6'4", so my body doesn't flip too well. I'm getting a little older, and it's just flipping's not in the game. So, I don't mind hitting the lip or getting above it with a straight arrow, or I love to spin. I love to roll. I'll do rolls and spins, and I love getting barreled. Those kind of things I'm looking for usually when I'm out there. And I love just being on the rail and cranking a big turn too. There's something about that. I just love being on the rail and going fast. I love it. I live for that stuff. Yeah, keep the questions coming, guys. I'm having a great time. Hope you guys are too. Hey, Phil, good to see you, man. Glad you made it. Yeah, he's asking. Phil's asking about some vector fins. You see a lot of. I actually have a. He's asking the benefits of. You see a lot of vectors are the small little vector system fins. If people aren't familiar with that, I mean, if you've seen the boards I've made, you probably have seen some pictures of the boards that have FCS plugs with vector fins. There's a couple different styles of those fins. You can check out their website, vectorsystems.com, I believe it is. But it's primarily for the DK riders. A lot of guys just love vector setups on boards because let me just talk a little bit about the DK side, and then I'll get into the prone side. He's asking about how if they're working for prone. But the DK, I think they're really beneficial because what happens as soon as you jump up onto your board and get up onto your knees and your foot to drop knee, you'll lose you're not holding onto the board with your hands anymore. So you just don't have as much control. So you can get a little side slippy sometimes, and you can side slip out really easy. And once you put the vector fins in the bottom of the board, you don't side slip anymore. I mean, you can if you really try hard, but they really lock you into the wave, and you can, and that allows you to drive off the bottom. And you hear a lot of guys talking about you can just get into a bottom turn and drive off those fins, and you're just not side slipping out. So a lot of guys love it just for that factor. It just locks you into the wave, and the side slip factor is just eliminated with those. But I have a prone board. I forget the exact number. It's I think it's pre-50. It's somewhere in the first 50 boards that I made a thruster setup. It has a double plug system and then a single back in the back. It was one of the first thruster ones I made. And I just made it off my normal template. I made it off my normal prone template, but and so what I wanted to experiment with was how it works for prone, because I'm pretty much a prone rider, and so I experimented with all the fin combinations that I could that they make in all the different positions. So what I found for me though is for prone riding, and I don't know whether maybe it was the fin placement on the sides. Maybe I needed to move them forward a little bit more so that way it get a little. I just felt like it had too much hold for a prone riding situation, especially on the side ones. If I put any kind of fin in the side positions, for me, number one, I could feel the drag. And I'm not riding pipeline. I ride, waves around here in Morro Bay, so they're not always the most powerful waves. But anything on the bottom of my board, I could feel that little bit of drag from the fin. So you got to have a wave that's a little bit more powerful for these things, especially in a prone situation, for them to really kind of be beneficial the way I see it. And like I said, I experimented with all the different positions, but what I ultimately ended up finding that I liked a lot was just a single fin in the very center position in the back. And it had just enough I could still release it for spins because it wasn't so far up on the rails. Like you can't spin once you put the fins up on the side position. But the one if you just have one in the back, I felt like I could still release it and spin with it. Release the tail and still get the board around. But once you go into if you're sitting back on the tail and you go into a bottom turn, boy, and that board is also a completely flat bottom board. I didn't put any channels in it. I just wanted to see what the fins did and how they held on a flat bottom board. And just that one little fin in the bottom, man, it basically in the back position, it eliminated all the side slip through the bottom, like a bottom turn or through a turn or on a steeper wave face. It really felt like I had a really good, almost like a really proper channel setup, or maybe even a little bit more hold than that. It felt good. I just rode the VS. That was kind of almost my favorite setup, is the smallest little VS vector fin. Let me pull one of those out. I have them right here. So I don't know if everybody's seen these up close, but they're kind of not like your normal traditional fin design, but they're really cool, unique design that I know that the vector guys have really spent a lot of time developing, and they work great. So this is the fin that I use. This is a single plug fin, and this is the one that I liked the best in my board. So I know there might be a few pictures on the Instagram of that board with the single fin in it too. So that was kind of my favorite setup, and like I said, it works for prone. But you know where I think it might be beneficial if you're a prone rider and you're riding massive waves and you want basically you just need your board to hold its line, and you need to make the shoulder because you're on a double, triple overhead jaws wave or something. I think that's when, if you had a weighted board with skegs on the side, you're not going to be skipping or sliding around once you go really fast. I think that might be one time when I think it's a good thing for prone riding is that. Bob's asking about why don't we see all these some of the more progressive tail designs and factory boards, and I honestly hope it does change in the future. I think the big problem with kicking a lot of boards out of a factory is production. That they're all production minded, and it's all about how long does it take to build this board. And I touched on this on the first video, but a clip crescent tail is the easiest. Besides a square tail, that's the next easiest tail to build. It takes the least amount of time to build. So when you're talking about a 3 to 6 scallop tail, it definitely there's more time involved. So if you're talking, I got to make 500 of these things, all that time adds up. And that's where I think the production boards stay with more of the traditional designs, because it ultimately comes back to we got to build these things quickly to make our money. And that's really not what I'm about. I'm about experimenting with cool designs and progressing designs, and I'm a one-man thing, and I have the time to do it, and I have the time to put and the attention to put into every single board. Where the factories, they're production line oriented. One guy does sands the core. One guy shapes not one guy does your whole board. They just do steps like a production line in the factory situations, and most of those people don't even bodyboard. So you got guys there, but they're quality because the repetition builds quality. The more you do something, the better the quality gets. You can really refine the process because you're doing the volume. And so I think that is the benefit of doing the high production things, is you can really improve the quality, and you can tweak the quality way faster because you're doing more the repetition. Yeah, Nathan, I know 3 to 6s spin just fine. I know it too. That people, oh, you can't spin multi-channel boards, or I've heard a lot of really, really interesting comments about multi-channel boards. I think maybe one of the funniest things I ever read was multi-channel boards are too fast. Think about that in the mindset of somebody who said that. And I can't imagine saying a board ever goes too fast, because that just means you don't know how to control speed. I mean, I want my board to go as fast as possible all the time. So, all right, we got the spammer in here. Beat it, spammer. Yeah, you don't spin where the channels are. You spin up on the front part of the nose. You spin in the front part of your board, not the back half. If you're spinning on the back half of the board, you're never going to make it. You're never going to make it around. You only spin on the front side of your board. So, yeah, keep the questions coming, guys. Um, yeah, exactly. That's what it's about, Nathan. It's about getting the meeting of the minds. Really, you got all these people that have all this history and knowledge of stuff. I mean, that's the thing about me is that, people think that, I have all this knowledge about boards and riding. And yeah, I mean, I put my time into this sport, but there's people that have been riding and doing it a lot longer. I didn't even ride a boogie board or a bodyboard until about 2001. I think is about the first time I even went into caught my first wave was about 2001. And that's after what most people consider the heyday of bodyboarding, which was in the 90s. I'm a late bloomer for sure. And I think that's allowed me to not be stuck on all those traditional designs that a lot of people hold on to, is that they're so attached to all those the traditional designs, because they grew up and that's what they remember. And those old boards were the ones that were in their minds. Oh, that was the best board, but that's where I come in, and I'm not going to be stuck to those designs. I want to push and move past that. And I mean, I'm influenced by the past. I think there's some really cool things that were done in the past. Yeah, run and takeover at Waco Surf, Jim. We're going to have to make that happen. We've been talking about that for a while now. I think that really needs to happen. Yeah, so I'm going to be down to Waco. We got to get a day. We just got to get to drop in there, and me and you, Jim, we need to get in a session in there. I'd love to surf that pool. It looks really fun. I mean, it's not the biggest wave, but boy, it sure is consistent. So yeah, I mean, there's some other things that maybe I wanted to touch on. I get asked this one question a lot, and just recently, because I post online about, I just got my core shipment, and I think that there's a lot of people out there that are curious and want to build their own boogie board, and I don't think that, or bodyboard. I don't think that people realize how complicated it is to put one of these things together. It's not like building a surfboard. Surfboards, and people think, oh, you're just going to shape this piece of core and glass. Like a surfboard, you just shape a piece of foam and you glass over. I mean, you got to do the fin boxes and stuff like that too, but it's a much easier process after the piece of foam is shaped to do a surfboard. I mean, once you shape the core of a bodyboard, there's so much more work that goes into that thing to get all the skins and the bottom slick and all the other things that happen to that board. The stringers, everything else is so complicated, and not to mention you got to have a laminator. You can't just do it with a heat gun, and you can't go down to Home Depot and buy a laminator. You got to build it from scratch, and it almost is a rite of passage to become a shaper, is to build your own laminator. And that knowledge is sacred knowledge in the industry. There's only a few people that even have seen a laminator, let alone how to build one or design one, or how all the pieces and parts work. It's a really complicated design of the machine. And you want to build a boogie board, you can't build a boogie board without a laminator. So, and then that's just one of the things that go into building. You can see this thing that's sitting behind me right here you can kind of see part of it over here. It's a horizontal bandsaw that swings. So it's a swinging bandsaw, and that's what I use to cut the underside of the nose cut. So I have this whole swinging bandsaw that just does that one process of the board. So you can imagine there's that. I mean, I have 3 bandsaws in my shop, and they all do different things. So you got to have a bunch of tools, specialized tools, just to make this little boogie board. It's not like I just need a sander and a heat gun and a razor knife. You need a lot more specialized tools just to build a bodyboard. One of the things that I use a lot, and it's a custom little tool, and there is a picture of this thing on the Instagram too, and here's another tool. Like, look at this thing. This is what I use to cut the top chine of a board. So you got your lower rail angle, but then you got that the top part that cuts off. This is the tool that I made that does all of that. So, I mean, just one of the tools you need. Just for one of the steps. So there's a lot of stuff a lot of little specialized tools that go into making a boogie board. I use routers. I use not to mention just the stringer, just to core the board out so you can put the stringer in the board. That's a whole nother jig and setup just so you can drill out core out the board to shove the stringer in. That's getting that thing flat and straight's not as it is. That took some process. That's a process. got to have a couple different drills to make all that happen. And even like I said, it's not just a razor knife and a heat gun. You got to have a lot more goes into this than I think people realize. So let's keep the questions coming, guys. Anybody out there curious about anything, hit me up. Just fire away over on the right side here with questions. I'm all about answering anything that you guys are curious about. Exactly, Phil. You got to be skilled in a lot of different things to build a boogie board. I mean, just the laminator alone, you got to be practically electrician just to put the damn thing together. There's so much electrical work that goes in just to making the electrical things happen on a laminator. And I had to put a whole new breaker into my panel just to run the laminator, because it's a full 220 heater in that thing, and air blower and all kinds of different stuff that go on with that stuff. So there's a lot that goes into that thing. Looney Productions asking how much boards cost. So my boards right now they started about at 300 and go up depending on the details and plus shipping. So unless you're in California, I try to for local boards, because it's not too expensive to ship here in California. So I usually just eat it, because I love keeping my boards local if I can. And the more boards I keep in California, it feels good to me to offer something to the California riders, because it doesn't really cost me that much to ship a board. It's usually $20-25 maybe to ship it anywhere in California. So I don't mind eating that or working it into the cost of the board. This recent batch of core I got, because it's all from a new supplier, the core prices went up. But I'm working on trying to get stuff from the manufacturer and cut out the middleman on all that. So I'm hoping to start bringing my core costs back down. And then, when I started off at $250, and I've had to raise the price because nothing's getting cheaper. I've had to raise the prices just a little bit, just so to cover the raw material costs. Jim's asking, what's the most important thing you've learned from shaping board from board 1 to now? What's the most important thing? I think maybe slow down. I think slowing down and really enjoying the process and taking your time with the board, for me, that's just where I've learned. Because I'm always I'm a high energy person. I get in the shop and I want to grind and work hard, and I want to work fast. And sometimes that leads to some mistakes. So it's better just to slow down and take your time with the process, and just take your time with each step. I've learned some other things maybe about I think that's the big one. Just slow down, take your time. That's probably the thing. What's my favorite board you've made? For myself, probably my tombstone. Like I said, my tombstone's probably hey Andy, good to see you. My tombstone's probably my favorite board. It's been around the longest. I've been riding it for over probably 4 years. I just love that board. It is a great board. I've had so many good sessions on it. It's ridiculous. Like I said, you can take it out on the smallest of days and have a great time. It's just a wonderful little board. Wonderful design. I mean, I think the more people that open their minds to the possibilities and getting away from the traditional boogie board shape, there's some other things out there that work and they're fun, that are different. Don't be afraid to try something outside the box. You might find the light bulb will go on and you're like, oh wow, this is really fun. I should have tried this a long time ago. So yeah, I mean that's let's see. I think I board 48 to me also was a really fun board. I think because I really started dialing in the first like maybe the first 50 boards, I was still refining the process of my shop. So I think by about I hit 48. The 48, I mean, quite a few of those early boards were my boards, because I didn't really want to get them all out there. I wanted to test them and ride them myself and make sure they were quality and they're going to hold up. But I think by the time I got to board 48, I think that the quality was starting to get back to where I was at when I left tubes. That I really think the boards were really starting to hold up and ride well. So the 48 to me was one kind of like the board that I was really comfortable with, and I felt like it was a really good board. And I think any board that I've made for myself since then, and I just love every new board. Is like, oh, that's amazing. I mean, I can't wait to ride 420. I'm just waiting for something that's like 4 to 6 foot. We just haven't really got anything over 4 to 6 foot swell here, and that's kind of the range I really like to ride it. I mean, I can go, my beach out here, it gets over 8 foot, and you're not going to make the power paddle out. It's pretty heavy. And once it gets over 8 foot, it's I don't want to say it's like Ocean Beach in San Francisco, but it's a hell of a paddle out there. You're 150 to 200 yards out. And if there's no channel, it's a big beach break. So you got to do some swimming. Andrew's asking about CNC shaping. Well, CNC shaping is pretty cool if you can afford the machine. You know, I guess it has its place for production. You know, and I think the cool thing about CNC is you get consistency. It gets back to that is you got a machine shaping something and it's going to be very consistent what you're doing, because the machine can just reproduce the process perfectly. Where, you know, something's done by hand, everyone's unique, everyone's different. I've seen some videos online, you know, probably out of the Mez factory that he has like a side-by-side shaper. He basically has one machine that'll cut 2 boards at the same time, which is pretty impressive. That you can, but still, I mean, it all has to be finished by hand regardless. All the CNC does is raw shape the board, and then you got to go in and do a bunch of final sanding. So and you know, you can't laminate. A CNC machine doesn't laminate the board or put the rails on or cut the tail or anything. All it's going to do is do the basic outline of the board, and it's going to shape the channels. I think they might do some of the deck contours on a CNC, but I think maybe that's still done by hand. I don't know. I haven't really seen any processes of cutting deck contours with a CNC. Usually it's just the rails and the channels are cut with a CNC. Looney Productions is asking if I've ever tried bamboo stringers. No, I haven't, but that's why not? I'd be game to try for sure. Yeah, I've been using the same stringers for since the beginning. It's the same stringers that, you know, back in the day at Tubes. It's the same stringer that were on all the Tubes boards that I ever made. Is my standard stringer, and I showed some of those stringers in the first chat. If you go back and look at that, there's 3/4 inch stringers. But bamboo sounds interesting. Why not? I'd be willing to give it a shot if I could find legitimate good bamboo pieces that we could push in. Why not? I'd be willing to give it a go. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though. You know, bamboo has some pretty cool, unique properties to it. So there might be something to that. Yeah. So, you know, okay. I kind of skipped over something I wanted to talk about earlier before. Is that, you know, I posted some pictures about the cores that I just received, and people sometimes will ask me, like, you know, where can I get? I want to build my own boogie board. Where can I get the materials? It's like, well, you know, it's a complicated process, man. You don't realize how many different sources of materials that go into making one board. There's probably 6 or 8 different places I need to order materials from just to put one board together. Yep, I have water in some of my Tubes board stringers in my Tubes board as well. And I know there's some Ronin boards out there that definitely have the same issue, because, like I said, I was in the early days of the Ronin boards. I was doing the stringers, capping the stringers the same way I was doing it at Tubes, and it wasn't the best way. So I've tried to refine how I cap the stringers off to help keep the water out. And then I've also started experimenting with solid stringers, so even they're not hollow. So once it's a solid rod, there's no way for water to get inside that stringer. And that I think there's something to that, is using solid stringers versus hollow tubes, and then you won't ever get water in a stringer. I call it a rain stick. I call it the rain stick stringer. It's like the rain stick that you turn upside down. You can hear the water go whoosh, whoosh, whoosh inside of it. It's the same thing, yeah. But, you know, for me, I got kind of nostalgic about it. I have an older Tubes custom board that I wrote out at AUKI. It was at the sandbar at AUKI next to Pipeline. And for me, I know that board basically has pipeline water in the stringers. And for me, it's almost every time I pick it up and I hear the water shoving around or rolling around, I'm like, oh yeah, it's pipeline water. That's super cool. Oh, Andy, the core from the new supplier is A+, man. I'm really excited about these next round of boards. In fact, I know you're in the list too, man. So I got 4 I'm just started on today, and maybe we could work out the details of your board for the first board of the next batch. I'm down to figure that out. So let's talk over the next couple of days, and we can get you in the queue for your board. Oh, I love to hear that, Kirk. I'm glad the board's working out for you. And yeah, warm water, cold water. Yeah, it's it. Yeah, boards. My boards work. I know. I ride in super cold water here in Morro Bay. It's usually the water here is in the 50s, and then I don't take the exact same board to Hawaii. I do like things that are a little bit stiffer and a little bit more buoyant, little more buoyancy when I go to Hawaii. So I do have a warm water board and a cold water board these days. I think there's benefits to having boards for both conditions of water temperature. But yeah, they're pretty versatile. I mean, I've definitely have taken single stringer boards to Hawaii. I just think that they get a little noodly in the warm water. I like to have an extra stringer or the solid. My most recent warm water board has solid rod stringers in it too, so it's a little stiffer and a little thicker. I've never worked with Jimmy. I've met him one time where when I started Ronin, I was desperate for materials, so I drove down to Oceanside and went to Custom X and went to JL and see if they had any scrap stuff. And both the places actually were kind enough to give me some of the very first pieces of Surlyn I ever got and bottom slick I ever got. I was looking for their blem stuff that was all scratched up. Anything you have in the scrap pile, I just needed to start pushing things through my laminator and testing it. So, yeah, Jimmy's a legend. Same thing with Pete at Custom X. Both of those guys are absolute legends, and they both had amazing influence on me. I'm super influenced by everything that those guys have done throughout history. They're super important in the world for sure, in the bodyboard world. They're absolute legends. Yep. I mean, both of them make great boards. There's no doubt about it. They're just different, and there's no better in my opinion. They're just different. Everything's a little bit different. That's one of the big problems I think these days, that there's not enough people actually making boards. Nick's asking about some asymmetrical designs. Well, I think obviously asymmetrical has its place, I think, more with DK than it does with a prone riding. Prone riding, there might be, if you're only going left and you're riding a point break and you're only going left, and you might want to play around. I mean, you're not even going to use the other rail. So if you're only going in one direction in your prone riding, I mean, it doesn't really matter. An asymmetrical design doesn't make a whole lot of sense for prone riding. But when it comes to DK, I think there are some benefits to having an asymmetrical design in DK because of your different pressure points. When you're prone riding, you basically have 6 points of contact, the way I see it, when you're prone riding. It's your hands, your elbows, and your hips or your thighs back there. So you got 6 points of contact right there, and you have a ton of control. But when you go to DK, it's a whole different game because you only basically have kind of 3 points of contact. You got your foot, you got your knee, and you got wherever your heels lock into the tail. So, and then what happens is whether you're going front side or back side, you're riding at different your weight's positioned differently because of the DK position. So where the wide point of the board is kind of in relationship to where those pressure points are happening. So just like when you're prone riding, your wide points usually are, kind of traditionally it's right about where your elbows are at. But when you're DKing, your wide points usually shift further back because your pressure points are back further. And then when you're on your front foot, you're obviously that pressure point's further up on the board, so you want your wide point a little bit further up on the board. But when you have your knee and your other leg back here, your pressure point's further back, so you probably want your wide point just a little bit further back. And same thing with the length of the board. Is that your backside, or where your foot, the foot side is, you usually have a shorter rail there because you're a little bit further up on the board, and when on the other side, you usually on the knee side, you usually want it a little bit longer on that side, just for hold and whatnot. That's kind of the theory behind the asymmetrical designs of DK, at least how I've been experimenting with it. I know there's quite a few people out there that have ridden those asymmetrical boards that I've done, and I've gotten a bunch of positive feedback, so I know it works. You only go left. That's right, Sterling. I think I've only seen you going left on waves. I don't think I've ever seen you on a right in all the pictures you post. I love going left too. I prefer going left than right. I'll go either way. I don't discriminate. But if you give me a choice, I prefer going left. All right, good seeing you, Looney. Take care. Have fun out in the surf. Nathan's saying Custom X put a stepped rail on like a Mach 10. Is the 10 near out the tail while maintaining the straight rail curvature? Put a stepped rail like a Mach 10. Well, they did they did a recent board that had kind of a stepped rail design that was pretty interesting. I want to say it was a model board for a pro rider, an older pro driver. I forget the guy's name off the top of my head. But that's a little bit different than a Mach 10. I did one just recently, like within the last 2 or 3 boards that had like that Mach 10 stepped in kind of rail. It's the first one Ronin board I've done like that, and I actually made a new curve template, so I can actually make more of those boards if people are interested in trying them. I'm kind of curious on how it goes. I've never even ridden a board that has that crazy stepped in kind of tail. So, but the guy Searle, the guy I made it for on Oahu, who I've made a few boards for now, I've already gotten feedback from him. He says he loves it. He says it performs great. But I'm curious on just how it rides. I haven't ridden one. I'm kind of curious on how it goes myself. Yeah, I don't know. When I was making that board, I was kind of like, man, I don't know how this thing's gonna go. It seemed kind of weird to me, but hey, don't be afraid to try something outside the box. You never know; it might blow your mind on how well it performs. So we'll see. Maybe I know there's a couple people that have hit me up that are maybe curious about getting one of those made. So you might see more of me making a couple more of those stepped rail boards in the future. And the Mach 10's one of them. There's a Manta out there that also has it, and I want to say there's a Turbo. I think Turbo also had a stepped rail board like that as well. I did a bunch of little research. I'm like, man, who's made these boards? When Cyril was asking me to make that board, I was like, well, geez, how many different stepped rail kind of boards have been kind of made? So I did some research, and those will be kind of the only 3 I could find pictures of. So there's been a few models of those boards out there, but I've never gotten to ride one. So yeah, getting back to the I want to build a bodyboard thing. I think that sourcing materials is one of the big ones. But there's a lot of people that have these materials that people aren't going to sell you material until you have the machines to actually make something, because it's really not worth their. I mean, sure, they'll take your money, but you don't want to spend a bunch of money on material and not be able to do anything with it. So you really got to take that into consideration when you I want to make a boogie board. It's not just it looks easy. I can just shape a piece of core and it's gonna, I can make a boogie board. No, there's a lot that goes into it. Andrew got a question. He says, can you talk about the characteristics about cross-link versus like PE skin? Crosslink's PE, but it has a different density to it. At least the crosslink pieces I've used in the past. I know a lot of the older tubes boards, they use crosslink for the actual bumper piece, so it has good characteristics for bumper. And I know some of the Mez boards also use it for the pinstripe or the inner rail. So you'll see some NMD boards and some stuff that comes out of the Brody factory that have a crosslink inner rail. It's a little bit more dense. It doesn't cost quite as much as a regular PE skin. It's usually used on lower line boards. You don't see a lot of high-end boards that have crosslink skins. So, I mean, I don't usually order it because you got, like I said, when you order these materials, you got to buy everything in bulk. So you're going to have to buy 50 pieces of skin minimum just to put an order in someplace. And do I want to make 50 crosslink skin boards? I don't know. No, not really. So there, you probably won't see too many crosslink boards that I make because I don't want to buy all 50 sheets of that stuff and have it sitting around and only, I'd rather spend the money on the more traditional materials that are easier to work with. And not that crosslink's hard to work with, but I've never used Volera. I know there's a couple other types of skins that you've maybe seen on other boards, but I like to stick with the traditional PE skins just because they're tried and true. They're great, And then there's a couple different types of skins out there, PE skins that even I use. There's some American-made skins that are made here in America that I feel that are kind of superior to the stuff that I buy overseas sometimes. But the problem with the domestic stuff made in America is there's only 5 colors. There's black, white, red, blue, and yellow. Those are the only 5 colors we can get here in America. And you'll see a lot of the like Jimmy and Pete down south. They tend to use those skins mostly because they're quality. They're really good skins. They also are a little bit, they're about a 16th inch thicker than the stuff that I get from overseas. Now all the specialty colors, that's the thing, is you want any fancy colors, you gotta order them from overseas. You gotta buy them in bulk. And but yeah, I think that's kind of the thing about skins, is that you got to really pick and choose your battle, because you got to buy in bulk. And you got. But I definitely will try to always stock as much of the American stuff as I can, just because I think it is a superior skin because of the extra thickness. It's a little bit more durable than the fancy colors, but people love their colors, so you gotta have a range of stuff. You can't just have the 5 basic colors. I like to try to have a range of colors besides just those standard 5. Of course, I can talk about. Andrew's asking about substrate versus a film, and people that don't understand that, I talked maybe a little bit about that in the first chat, but there's traditional ways about how to bond dissimilar materials. Now, when I say dissimilar, I mean, I was talking about that before, where you got a polypropylene core, but you got polyethylene skins that have to go stick to that, and it won't do that just with heat. So there are some modern substrates that we can put on the backside of skins, and I do that on all my boards that help solve that dissimilar material type of situation. A lot of the older boards were done without that substrate. So what happens is when you go to heat laminate something together, you put the skin to a core. You got to get that to bond, because it's not the same material if you're using polypropylene core, polyethylene skin. If you have a polyethylene skin, polyethylene core, then it's just going to bond with heat. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the dissimilar situation here, and you got to solve that problem with the polypropylene cores. So there's a material that comes in, and it's a substrate that you put on underneath, in between the skin and the core, and that it's a polypropylene skin that has film or adhesive on one side. You put that to the skin, and then what you have is a polypropylene backing to the polyethylene skin, and then that gets, because then it'll be polypropylene to polypropylene when you go to stick that to the core, and then it'll bond just with heat. That's how I do all of my boards. I don't do film boards I've done a couple, but I try to stay away from it, because I think that it's not as good of a situation. Because what happens, especially when you get into deck contours, I think that solving the dissimilar materials before you laminate the skin to the core is key. If you're trying to get that just a film deck to stick into all the contours and stuff, that's where you lead to delams and bubbles in the deck. We've all seen those old boards that have bubbled decks, and what those are just straight fit. It just has the adhesive on the backside of the polyethylene skin, and it's just stuck. That's the only thing bonding it to the polypropylene core. And what happens is that it's all heat activated. So what happens is you stick that out in the sun, and what happens is that any kind of air that's trapped in there will start expanding in the heat. So what that does is and then the heat also will loosen the glue, because it's all heat activated. So the hotter the board gets, the looser the glue gets. And if there's any air that's trapped within a contour or anything like that, that air expands, and then that's where you start getting the bubbles in a board. So it really is better to use the modern substrates underneath skins, because it really solves a lot. I've never even seen one of my decks delam or bubble. That substrate is the ultimate answer for bubbles and delams and stuff in a deck. So I really don't even like building boards without it. Let me see if I missed any questions here. Scan up through that. Yeah, Turbo was the first. Well, we're over the 1 hour, so I don't know. I mean, I was setting aside an hour to go on this thing, so if there's any last questions, maybe we'll get at it. And like I said, we can keep thinking about what topic you guys might want to talk about next week. Hit me up, make comments and if I post this after the fact, or hit me up through the Instagram or Facebook or anything like that if you guys want specific topics you want to cover. I'm going to try to do this every week if I got the time and I'm around. So appreciate everybody showing up today. We've definitely got a bigger turnout than last week, and hopefully we can keep on doing this and spread the knowledge. And like I said, we got all this history and people in here with knowledge about boards, and let's try to educate as many people as we can, and then have a good time talking about boogie boards. That's in bodyboarding. It's what this is all about. I really appreciate everybody coming out, and I appreciate all the support. And like I said, I got a bunch of core in, and I got more material. Bunch of new colors coming next month. Probably early next month. All the new colors should land. I got a bunch of stuff coming, so a bunch of new Surlyn colors and some skin colors coming from overseas. That they're all on the boat in the Middle Pacific right now. So can't wait to get all that stuff. I'm pretty excited about that, and got a new core supplier all set up, so I can be, there won't be any hiccups getting any more core. Appreciate all the support, and thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for showing up and all the questions. And I guess that's about it for now. All right, guys. Thanks for showing up. Ciao for now.